All right, everybody, back here for another whiteboard lecture. I've been asked some questions about, or been asked to expound a little bit on what my research is. So I want to talk about just a couple of the mechanisms that I'm thinking about which caused me to want to look into this problem to begin with. So the first thing is that of course we all have, digestive tract. We have a stomach, we have a small intestine, it's all wrapped around like this. And then we also have, it comes in over here somewhere. We also have a large intestine that leads to the anus and the rectum and everything. So then what we've now found out, or what science and research have now shown really within the last decade, is that although we've gone to war with microorganisms actually exist, especially here in the large intestine, in the colon, or what we call the gut. And they have to be there. They're necessary for health. We now know a 2019 paper reported that a particular species of Clostridium ramosum, is important. Clostridium ramosum. We know that this particular bacterium lives in the large intestine, and it works in symbiosis with enterochromaffin cells, which is a kind of cell in the large intestine, to turn the essential amino acid tryptophan into 5-hydroxytryptamine or serotonin. So we now know that serotonin is produced in the gut via the symbiotic relationship between enterochromaffin cells, or intestinal cells, and bacteria that live in those and live in symbiosis with those intestinal cells. Most people thought it was, think that serotonin is produced in the brain. It is not produced in the brain. So, anyways, the large intestine has what we call, generally is, used to an anaerobic state, or it means that there's no oxygen in there. Clostridium ramosum is an anaerobic bacteria. It's an obligate anaerobe, which means it cannot exist in the presence of oxygen. So, if a bacterium gets into the large intestine from anywhere else that can produce oxygen, then it offsets that delicate balance, or that delicate environment, and then the important species of bacteria that do things like help produce serotonin can be killed. So that's one mechanism. Now here's another mechanism, and this was what they call the non-communicable theory of, hold on just a second. It is the germ-organ theory of non-communicable disease. So, what this theory states, and it's published in Nature Reviews in the perspectives, or the opinion page, is that if facultative anaerobic bacteria get into the large intestine, and then a facultative anaerobe is something like E. coli. We've all heard of E. coli. Facultative means that it does not need oxygen for its metabolism. However, it can still exist in the presence of oxygen, whereas Clostridium cannot exist in the presence of oxygen. And this is important for serotonin synthesis. E. coli can and cannot exist in the presence of oxygen. So if the facultative anaerobe gets into the environment where the obligate anaerobe lives, the oxygen that it produces, the oxygen gas that it produces, can then kill this. Also, E. coli is known to cleave or degrade the essential amino acid tryptophan. You may not have heard that, but when you eat, turkey, a lot of these meats, tryptophan is an essential amino acid, which means that we have to get it through our diet. Our bodies cannot take any other substrate and make it into the essential amino acid tryptophan. So we eat meat and different things to get this into our diet. Again, I said that tryptophan, we eat it, tryptophan in, tryptophan goes into the stomach. It's a protein, so some peptic enzymes begin breaking it down here, and it gets broken down. Then it makes it to the large intestine, here, the outer part of the bowels that goes here, and then you defecate. But when the tryptophan gets into the large intestine, then that's where the Clostridium species gets a hold of it through the symbiotic relationship, turns it into serotonin, and then that's attached to platelets in the blood and circulated to the rest of the body. So, E. coli is known, as I said, and I learned this in microbiology, we learned this in lab, to degrade tryptophan. So if you eat the tryptophan, it gets in here and there's a facultative anaerobe, or E. coli especially there, it's going to degrade. So you have tryptophan to serotonin. If the E. coli is there, that could very well be inhibited, and that's the question that I'm asking with my research. Can E. coli, based off the foods that we eat, because E. coli likes these things, glucose, lactose, sucrose. These are all sugars that are common in the American diet, absolutely common. E. coli is also common in, around the ruminants or the cows and everything that we eat, and the milks and the different things like that. So if we're consuming a lot of these foods, and Americans are consuming massive amounts of these foods, could that contribute to an E. coli overgrowth, which could then inhibit the tryptophan serotonin pathway? Again, this is a question that I'm asking with my research. So what we have to do that, of course, is to take a swab of the rectal cavity. That is to say that you have to take a swab, insert it into the anus deep enough that you can hit the deeper tissues of the rectal cavity, so you can swab those, because we need to find out if some of these anaerobes are here, and they're very hard to culture. And that's the importance of the swabbing procedure, because we really need to find out if these are here, and if these are here, and what proportions are they there. Is E. coli in the gut, has it overgrown in the gut because of what we eat, such that it could inhibit this? These are the questions that I want to ask, and it's a very important question, because as we all know, if we don't have serotonin in the body, then how can we not be depressed? Because serotonin is a neurotransmitter. And these neurotransmitters are absolutely essential for the nervous communication that goes on with our brain and our spinal cord and our tissues, to tell us different things about our environment, and to help us to have these feelings of well-being. If we don't have serotonin, how can we have these? If we're not consuming tryptophan, how can we have these? If we're eating too much of the foods that support the growth of the bacteria that will be there probably, how can we have this? Also, serotonin is linked to anxiety, and if you have taken any of the SSRIs or any of the anxiety medications, Celexa, Paxil, Prozac, Lexapro, Wellbutrin, I mean, we could go on and on and on, probably even with the new ones that they're making. These medicines are meant to target serotonin communication in the brain. So here's what you have. Well, let's go right here. Let's make sure you can see that. So if you have one neuron, they look something like this. This is a crude drawing. This is a neuronal cell. This is the cell body, the nucleus, and then you have the nerve. This is exactly what a nerve looks like. So you have these very tiny cells reaching out like this. So then when you have another cell, just like that, they interconnect right there. And where they connect, this is called a synapse. And in the synapse, this is a place where at the connecting site, or at the sending and receiving sites, serotonin is to be released from one neuron and be received into this neuron. And that serotonin release traveling to the receiving neuron, and then being received by the receiving neuron, that is essentially what we call homeostasis. You see what I'm saying? The signal was communicated and received, good. However, these medications are meant because they think that this serotonin is being released into the synaptic space and not being taken up by this, but rather being retaken by the sending neuron. To me, I think there's a good reason to go in there and look at some of the reasoning behind that, and start to see if there are some deeper questions we can ask, and if we can then inhibit all of the medications and just start with our food. I know everybody doesn't want to do that, but that's the thing I think that we're going to have to do. That's the thing I'm studying, and that's why I'm doing this research project, because I think that maybe we can heal the human race by going back to what the human race evolved with. We have not evolved with McDonald's, Starbucks, Burger King, Taco Bell, Five Guys, Papa John's, Pizza Huts, none of this. So everybody's eating all the grains and everything, all the glucose, lactose, and sucrose that E. coli love, and they're eating none of the vegetables or the fibers that some of these bacteria need for health and for survival. That's the problem with our health, I think. I've spent a lot of time studying this, so I would appreciate anyone else who's interested in get involved with the research, and let's see if we can answer this question. Thank you for watching.